What can we expect from this meeting when the U.S. delegation arrives in China?
Well, I think we need to temper our expectations. This is the first meeting between the senior level delegations since the United States has threatened the imposition of tariffs. And the U.S. is sending a large delegation. It's not clear that everyone on that team has the same views on what the possible solution is. And I think the larger the delegation, the more speeches we're going to see and the less conversation. But once again, it's the beginning of a process, I think.
But still, we are getting close to very crucial deadlines, including the public comment period on the U.S. tariffs on $50 billion worth of Chinese goods ending very soon. So if the conversations break down, how soon could we see tariffs?
I mean, we technically could see them a week or two after the May 22nd deadline for public comment, but it also could be extended for a number of months as well. And remember, we just saw just 2 days ago the extension by 1 month of the imposition of the steel and aluminum tariffs for certain countries. So I think if conversations are happening and there is some hope for progress and for a solution, that the administration will delay the imposition of the tariffs in hopes of finding a negotiated solution.
So Wendy, apart from the merits, as it were, of the negotiation, take us into the dynamics of what this negotiation is likely to be. As you suggest, there are several members, high-ranking members on the U.S. side. There's really one, her, is really the person who's doing it on the other side. I assume that the U.S. is trying to say, this is really important. That's why we're sending so many senior people over. How do the Chinese take that? How will they react to that dynamic?
Well, I have to believe that they understand that different people in this administration and among the delegation have expressed different views about how they want to solve this issue. And so the Chinese may try to exploit those differences and may try to have, for example, side conversations with Secretary Mnuchin or Larry Kudlow, who seem to be more open to finding a negotiated solution.
So if you were advising, or for that matter, on the delegation at this point, what would you say this is the most realistic, positive thing for the United States that could come out of this round of negotiations? This is what our goal should be.
I would say that the U.S. delegation should use it as an opportunity to put down their markers on their concerns, but also to signal areas where they would like to see the negotiations head to. I think without giving the Chinese some direction and some idea of what success would be, it's going to be very difficult to resolve these already very complex issues.
Wendy, how have the steel and aluminum tariffs on U.S. allies like the EU, Canada, and Mexico affected America's leverage on dealing with China?
Well, you know, in dealing with China, it's always important to have a unified front with other like-minded countries. And I think the fact that we are, you know, possibly imposing tariffs on them on aluminum and steel really dampens their enthusiasm and willingness to work with us on the China issue. So, in my view, we should have just gone forward with the Section 301 actions. We should have put the Section 232 actions aside and really try to deal with the steel and aluminum problem in a multilateral setting where we could have gotten at the issue of Chinese overcapacity in these two sectors. Hitting our allies on steel and aluminum is not going to help us solve the China problem.
The logic here by the Trump administration is that a trade war with China, that the U.S. could win that because basically the U.S. gets more exports from China. How true is that?
Well, I've heard that argument, and I just don't buy into it. I think the U.S. has a lot to lose, and I think when we start seeing the public comments and the hurt that certain companies and their workers are going to feel by some of the tariffs that the U.S. has threatened to put into place, but also the counter-retaliation, and particularly how our ag community will suffer, I think it's going to demonstrate that we have a lot to lose through a tariff war.
Wendy, is there also an opportunity here, an opportunity not explicitly but implicitly to work with President Xi, perhaps to accomplish some of his goals, specifically, for example, in the opening up of financial markets, something that people speculate he actually wants to get done somehow, and also, for that matter, with respect to intellectual property. He really does want to move forward in the technology area. He needs a better intellectual property system. Is there a possibility that we could have a negotiation that looks like President Trump got something affirmative from it, but at the same time, President Xi is saying, you know what, that's okay, make me do that?
Yes, I mean, there's clearly shared interest, and the Chinese have already signaled areas where they do want to move, where our interests converge. The question is that sufficient for this administration, which has put on the table their strong and grave concerns with where trade and competition in advanced technologies is headed? And that's really, in my mind, kind of the core issue, and I don't hear China coming forward with ways to address concerns on that issue. That may happen this week, it may not, but I think in order to have success, we're going to need to address that issue, which the administration has put front and center.
I mean, and the trade tensions are going on in so many different fronts that we haven't even mentioned that the Treasury needs to come up with investment curbs on Chinese investments. The deadline is coming up very soon, I believe, the end of May. So what could we see there?
Exactly, and from what I understand, the Treasury Department is trying to set up kind of a reciprocal investment regime to mirror restrictions that China has in place in certain sectors. And you're correct, the announcement of such restrictions is supposed to happen this month. Whether it does or not remains to be seen, but I do think we may see tensions increase on this trade front with China in the coming weeks.